The ceremony was meant to be a humiliation. Everyone in the Galactic Assembly Hall knew it. From the ancient Velthari senators in their floating chairs to the youngest human diplomats standing at the back of the room, the gift was an insult, wrapped in silk words. Ambassador Kethvorin, of the Velthari Dominion, raised his forearms in what his species considered a gesture of generosity. His golden scales caught the light of a dozen alien suns streaming through the crystal dome above. He had practiced this moment for weeks. "To our youngest members of the Galactic Concord," he announced, his translator turning clicks and whistles into smooth human speech, "we offer this vessel as a symbol of friendship. May it carry humanity toward a brighter future among the stars." On the massive display screen behind him, an image appeared. It showed a ship that looked like it had been pulled from a graveyard. Rust covered its hull in patches of orange and brown. Its engines were dark and dead. Whole sections of the outer plating had been removed and never replaced, leaving gaps that showed the bones of the ship. Beneath, the Velthari delegates made sounds that their translators did not convert. Laughter needed no translation. Captain Mirela Vasquez stood in the human section and watched the display. She was 43 years old, born on Mars during the water riots. Raised on cargo ships that jumped between Earth and the outer colonies, she had seen plenty of junk in her life. She had flown plenty of junk too, but she had also learned something that the Velthari had never needed to learn. When you grow up with nothing, you develop an eye for hidden value. The ship on the screen was called the Vagrant. It was 900 years old, built during an era the Velthari no longer remembered clearly. They had found it drifting in a dead system and decided it would make the perfect gift for the species. They considered little more than clever animals. Mirela smiled. "Ambassador." Kethvorin saw that smile and felt something he could not name. It was not the reaction he had expected. Humans were supposed to feel shame. They were supposed to understand their place. "We accept your generous gift," Mirela said, and her voice carried across the hall without any need for amplification. With gratitude, the word gratitude made several Velthari senators shift in their floating chairs. There was something wrong with how she said it, something that suggested she meant it. 3 weeks later, the Vagrant arrived at Prometheus Station, humanity's largest orbital shipyard. A crowd had gathered to watch the ancient vessel drift into the repair bay. Most of them expected to see a joke. What they saw was a mystery. Kofi Asante was the first to board her. He was the chief engineer of Prometheus Station, a man who had taken apart and rebuilt more ships than anyone alive. His hands were scarred from plasma burns and mechanical accidents. His mind held blueprints that had never been written down. He walked through the Vagrant's corridors with a flashlight in one hand and a scanner in the other. The air was stale and thin. The walls were covered in symbols that his translation software could not read. The ship felt old in a way that went beyond years. It felt ancient. "This is not Velthari construction," he said into his recorder. "The basic framework matches their current designs. But everything beneath the surface is different. Older. More complex." He found the engine room on the third day. The door had been sealed with warnings in 17 languages, most of them dead. It took him 6 hours to cut through. What he found inside made him sit down on the cold metal floor and stare for a very long time. The engine was not an engine. Or rather, it was an engine in the same way that a hurricane was a breeze. The technology that filled the room was so far beyond anything Kofi had ever seen that he felt like a child looking at the stars for the first time. He called Captain Vasquez immediately. She arrived within the hour. Still wearing the formal uniform from a diplomatic function, she stood beside Kofi and looked at the impossible machine that filled the chamber. "What is it?" she asked. "I do not know," Kofi admitted. "But I know one thing for certain. The Velthari did not build this. They found this ship somewhere, took credit for it, and then sealed away everything they did not understand." "Why would they do that?" Kofi pointed at the warnings on the door. "Because they were afraid of it. Look at the seal dates. They locked this room 800 years ago and never opened it again. They gave us this ship because they thought it was worthless junk, but they never even knew what they had." Over the following months, the team grew. Dr. Yuki Tanaka joined as the xenopsychologist, trying to understand the minds that had built such a machine. Samuel Okonkwo came aboard as the navigator, a man who had flown everything from atmospheric shuttles to deep space freighters. Dozens of engineers, scientists, and specialists made the Vagrant their home. They learned the ship's secrets slowly. The hull that looked like rust was actually a self-repairing alloy that had simply run out of energy. Given power, it began to heal itself. The gaps in the plating were not damage, but vents for a cooling system that operated at temperatures near absolute zero, and the engine. The thing that the Velthari had feared so much, they locked it away, was something that should not have existed at all. Kofi called it the Cascade Engine. Dr. Tanaka called it a probability drive. Samuel simply called it the Dream Machine. It did not move through space the way normal engines did. It moved through possibility. It took the ship not from one place to another, but from one version of reality to another. Sliding between the spaces where things might be and things that were, the Velthari who had tried to use it centuries ago had all gone mad. Their minds were built for certainty, for absolute truths, for a universe that worked according to fixed rules. The Cascade Engine required a pilot who could hold two impossible ideas at the same time. It required someone who could believe in contradictions. It required a human. The night they realized this, Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Vagrant and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velthari Dominion ruled 4,000 worlds with absolute certainty. They had given humanity this ship as a joke, as proof that even their garbage was better than anything humans could build. They had no idea what they had actually given away. "How long until we can test it?" she asked. Kofi appeared beside her, his face lit by the glow of a datapad. "The engine is ready. The question is whether we have a pilot who can survive the link." Samuel stepped forward from the shadows of the bridge. "I will do it," he said. "I have been dreaming about it for weeks." "I think the ship has been dreaming about me too." Mirella looked at him for a long moment. She saw no fear in his eyes, only wonder. "Then let us show the galaxy what their garbage can do." The chamber that held the Cascade Engine hummed with a sound that was not quite sound. It was more like a feeling, a vibration that moved through bone and blood rather than air. Samuel Okonkwo stood at the center of it all, wearing a suit covered in sensors and wires that connected him to the ancient machine. Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched from behind a reinforced observation window. Her fingers moved across her datapad, recording every flicker of Samuel's brain activity. She had spent 3 months studying the alien texts they had found aboard the Vagrant, translating warnings and instructions. Left by builders whose species had vanished long ago, she understood now why the Velthari had failed. "The engine does not work on physics alone," she had explained to the crew the night before. "It works on belief, on perception." The builders called it a probability drive because it moves through possibilities, not space. The pilot has to hold multiple realities in their mind at once. They have to believe the ship is here and there at the same time. Captain Vasquez had frowned at that. "And the Velthari could not do this?" "Their minds are crystalline," Yuki said. "They think in straight lines. A thing is true, or it is false. There is no space between." When they tried to link with the engine, their minds could not accept the contradiction. They broke. But humans can do this. Yuki had smiled then, and there was something like pride in her expression. Humans dream. Humans tell stories about things that never happened. Humans can love someone and be angry at them at the same time. We hold contradictions in our hearts every single day. It is what makes us strange to the other species, and it is what makes us perfect for this. Now Samuel stood in the engine room, breathing slowly, trying to quiet the fear that flickered at the edges of his thoughts. He had flown ships through asteroid fields and plasma storms. He had navigated the crushing gravity wells of dying stars. But this was different. This was not about skill. This was about something deeper. "Samuel," Captain Vasquez's voice came through the speakers. "We can still wait. We can run more tests." "Oh," he said. "The ship is ready. I can feel it. It has been waiting for someone like me for a very long time." He closed his eyes and let the connection begin. The first thing he felt was cold. cold that went beyond temperature into something more fundamental. It was the cold of empty space, of the void between stars. Of all the places where nothing existed yet, then the cold became something else. It became possibility. Samuel's mind expanded outward like a wave spreading across still water. He felt the ship around him, not as metal and circuits, but as a living thing made of maybes and might be's. He saw the universe not as it was, but as it could be. Every star was 1,000 different stars. Every planet held 1,000,000 different futures, and the vagrant existed in all of them at once. Back in the observation room, Yuki watched her instruments go wild. "He is doing it," she whispered. "He is actually doing it." Captain Vasquez leaned forward. "What are the readings?" "The ship is ... flickering. It exists in 7 different locations simultaneously. Our sensors cannot decide which one is real because they are all real. Samuel is holding it together." On the bridge, Kofi Asante stared at the viewscreen. One moment the stars outside looked normal, the next moment they shifted, showing a different part of space entirely. Then they changed again and again, cycling through views of places scattered across the entire sector. "This is impossible," he said to no one in particular. "This breaks every law of physics we know." In the engine room, Samuel laughed. It was not the laughter of madness that had taken the Velthary pilots centuries ago. It was the laughter of joy, of discovery, of a child who had just learned to fly. "It is like dreaming," he said, his voice echoing through the ship's speakers. "It is like being everywhere I have ever imagined. I can feel the ship wanting to go further. It wants to show me more." "Bring it back," Captain Vasquez ordered gently. Slowly, one location at a time. Samuel focused his thoughts. One by one, the possibilities collapsed. The flickering view screens steadied. The vagrant pulled itself back together from 7 places into one, settling into normal space with a shudder that ran through every deck. When Samuel opened his eyes, he found tears running down his face. He did not know why he was crying. He only knew that he had touched something beautiful. The crew gathered in the medical bay, while doctors checked Samuel for damage. They found none. His mind was whole, his body strong. Whatever had broken the Velthary pilots had not broken him. "How did it feel?" Yuki asked, her recorder running. Samuel thought for a long moment before answering. "Have you ever had a dream where you knew you were dreaming? Where you could do anything, be anywhere, because none of it was fixed?" "It was like that, but real. The ship and I were one thing, and we could exist as pure potential until we chose to become solid again." Captain Vasquez stood by the door, her arms crossed. "Can you do it again?" "Yes, Isali. I think I could go further next time. Stay in the probability state longer. Travel through more possibilities before coming back." Kofi shook his head slowly. "Do you understand what this means? If we can make more of these engines, if we can train more pilots, we would have ships that cannot be tracked, cannot be targeted, cannot be stopped. We could be anywhere and everywhere at once." "The Velthary will notice," Yuki said quietly. "They have monitoring stations across the sector. They will have detected the energy signature when Samuel activated the engine. They will know something impossible just happened." She was right. 14 light years away, Velthary observation post recorded a burst of energy that should not have existed. The officer on duty ran the readings 3 times before sending an urgent message to his superiors. Something had activated the probability drive. Something that should have been locked away forever. And against all logic, against all their understanding of lesser species. The signal came from the worthless junk they had given to the humans. Within hours, the message reached the Velthary High Council. Debates that normally took years were concluded in days. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Dominion felt something it had forgotten was possible. Doubt they sent a fleet. 40 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Their mission was simple: retrieve the ship, eliminate anyone who had learned its secrets, and bury the technology once more. They expected to find frightened primitives in a rusted hulk, ready to surrender. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Valkyrie fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a wave of silver arrows. 40 warships spread across the darkness of space, each one gleaming with weapons that had not been fired in anger for centuries. They did not need to be fired often. The sight of them was usually enough. Admiral Vethkora stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the tactical display with all 4 of his eyes. The human station floated ahead, a collection of metal and light that seemed fragile compared to his magnificent fleet. And somewhere nearby, hidden among the orbital platforms, was the ship that had caused so much concern. "Locate the vagrant," he ordered. His sensors officer worked quickly. "Found it, Admiral. It is moving away from the station at low speed. No escort. No weapon signatures." Vethkora made a sound that was almost like pity. "They are trying to run." "In that piece of junk?" waved one arm dismissively. "Send the standard warning. Tell them to power down and prepare to be boarded. If they refuse, we will demonstrate what happens to those who steal from the Dominion." The message was sent. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then the vagrant turned around and flew directly toward the fleet. On the bridge of the ancient ship, Captain Mirella Vasquez sat in the command chair and watched the enemy vessels grow larger on the view screen. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She had known this moment would come. She had planned for it. "They are targeting us," Kofi reported from his engineering station. "Weapons locked. Let them," Mirella said. "Samuel, are you ready?" In the engine room, Samuel Okonkwo floated at the center of the Cascade engine's web of light and wire. He had been practicing for weeks, pushing himself further each time, learning the shape of his own impossible abilities. He was no longer afraid. He was eager. "Ready," he said. Mirella pressed a button on her chair. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want everyone in this sector to hear this." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open." Mirella stood up and faced the view screen. She knew that her image was now being broadcast to every ship, every station, every colony within range. She knew that the Valkyrie Admiral was watching. She wanted him to watch. "This is Captain Mirella Vasquez of the Vagrant," she said. "You gave us this ship as a joke. You called it garbage. You expected it to break down? Expected us to fail? Expected us to prove that we were the lesser species you always believed us to be." She smiled, and it was the same smile that had unsettled Ambassador Kethvorin months ago. "You were wrong." "Fire," Admiral Vethkora commanded. 20 warships unleashed their weapons at once. Beams of blue light crossed the darkness, enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The vagrant was directly in their path. A rusted target that could not possibly survive. Samuel closed his eyes and let go of certainty. The vagrant became a ghost. On the Valkyrie flagship, every alarm started screaming at once. The tactical display showed the vagrant breaking apart into dozens of phantom images, each one as real as the others. The weapon's fire passed through empty space where the ship had been a moment before, striking nothing but void. "What is happening?" Vethkora demanded. "The ship is everywhere," his sensors officer said, and there was fear in his voice. "It exists in multiple locations simultaneously. Our targeting systems cannot determine which one is real. They are all real. None of them are real." The fleet fired again and again. Their weapons cut through space, destroying phantom after phantom, but the vagrant simply appeared elsewhere each time. It was not dodging. It was not hiding. It was existing as pure possibility, refusing to be pinned down to a single point in the universe. And then, without any warning, the vagrant appeared directly behind the flagship. It materialized close enough that its running lights reflected off the Valkyrie hull, close enough that Admiral Vethkora could see the rust on its plating through his bridge windows, close enough to touch. "Hello, Admiral," Mirella's voice came through every speaker on his ship. "You seem confused?" "Let me explain something." The fleet turned their weapons toward the flagship's position, but none of them could fire. The vagrant was too close. Any shot that hit it would hit their admiral as well. "You locked away this technology because you were afraid of it," Mirella continued. "Your minds could not handle the contradiction. A thing could not be here and there at the same time. so your pilots went mad trying to make it work. You decided the engine was broken, was dangerous, was best forgotten. The Vagrant drifted slowly around the flagship, staying just out of reach. But humans are different. We dream, we imagine. We believe in things we cannot see. We hold love and loss in our hearts at the same time. We live in contradictions every single day. She paused. Your garbage was never garbage. It was waiting. Waiting for someone who could understand it. Admiral Vethkoa found his voice. You cannot escape. You are one ship against 40. Even with this trick, you will eventually fall. Maybe, Morella agreed. But here is the thing about humans, Admiral. We are very good at sharing. This ship, this engine, this beautiful, impossible technology that you threw away because you were afraid of it, we are going to give it to everyone. Every species you have kept under your foot, every world you have exploited, every people you have told they were inferior. The transmission was still broadcasting. Across the sector, millions of beings watched and listened, on 100 different worlds. Those who had accepted their place beneath the Dominion began to feel something they had not felt in generations. Hope. You gave us your trash because you thought we were beneath you, Morella said. You were right about one thing. We are beneath. You, beneath your notice, beneath your understanding, and now, beneath your defenses. The Vagrant flickered one more time and vanished from every sensor in the fleet. When the Velthary finally returned home, they did not bring the ship with them. They did not bring prisoners, or secrets, or victory. They brought only a recording that spread across the galaxy like fire and on 1,000 worlds. The forgotten and the abandoned began to dream of possibilities. The first message arrived 3 days after the confrontation with the Velthary fleet. It came through a channel so old and so encrypted that the Vagrants' communication systems almost missed it entirely. We watched your broadcast, the message said. We want to talk. The sender was a Keth, a member of a species that had been forbidden from space travel for 200 years. According to the official records, the Keth were too unstable, too dangerous, too primitive to be trusted with starships. According to the Velthary, keeping them grounded was for their own protection. Captain Vasquez read the message 3 times before responding. Where do you want to meet? A location appeared on her screen. It was a dead system. A place where the stars had burned out long ago and nothing remained but cold rocks drifting in eternal darkness. The perfect place for those who did not want to be found. The Vagrant arrived first. Then came the Keith in a ship they had built in secret, hidden in caves beneath their largest ocean. Then came the Morani, whose homeworld had been stripped of resources by the Concord centuries ago. Then came the Solari, species whose entire history had been erased and rewritten by their conquerors. 12 species gathered in that dead system. 12 species who had been told they were inferior, who had been kept weak, who had been forgotten. They looked at the rusted human ship that had stood against 40 Velthary warships, and they saw something they had lost long ago. Chance. The meeting took place on the Vagrant itself. The ship's cargo bay was large enough to hold representatives from all 12 species, though just barely. Captain Vasquez stood at the center, surrounded by beings that looked nothing like her, but whose eyes held the same desperate hope. We saw what you did, said Tethmora, the Keth representative. Her scales were the color of deep ocean water, and her voice carried the weight of generations of anger. You stood against the Dominion and survived. We want to know how. Vasquez nodded to Kofi, who activated a holographic display showing the Cascade engine's basic principles. This is what they gave us. Technology so advanced that the Velthary were afraid of it. They locked it away because their minds could not make it work. Human minds can. Asked a Solari delegate, his silvery form flickering with curiosity. Yes. We do not fully understand why. Our xenopsychologist believes it has something to do with how humans think, how we process reality. We are comfortable with uncertainty in ways that other species are not. The Morani representative leaned forward. Her name was Kessa, and her eyes were the deep red of her dying world's sunsets. What are you offering? Why call us here? Vasquez took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. We are offering partnership. Not the kind the Concord offers, where one species rules and others obey. Real partnership. We share what we know. You share what you know. Together, we become something none of us could be alone. Silence filled the cargo bay. The 12 species looked at each other, centuries of distrust and isolation making them hesitant. They had been taught that cooperation meant submission. They had been taught that help always came with chains. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. She had spent months studying the cultures and histories of the species gathered here, learning their pain, understanding their fears. The empires stay in power because they keep us apart, she said softly. They tell each of us that we are the only ones who suffer, that we are alone in our weakness. But look around this room. We are not alone. We have never been alone. We have just been made to believe that we were. Tethmora stood. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as if she was making a decision that had taken 200 years to reach. The Keth have been building ships in secret for generations. We have hidden technology that the Velthari do not know exists. If you are serious about this partnership, we will share what we have. One by one, the others stood as well. Each one offered something. The Marani had preserved ancient engineering knowledge from before their world was stripped bare. The Solari had recovered fragments of their true history, including scientific discoveries that their conquerors thought they had destroyed. A dozen species, each with pieces of a puzzle that had been deliberately scattered across the galaxy. Kofi Asante watched the offers pile up and felt tears forming in his eyes. "We can build a fleet," he whispered. "We can actually build a fleet." Over the next several months, the coalition grew. The Vagrant became a symbol that appeared on flags and broadcasts across 100 worlds. A rusted ship that refused to die. A human captain who smiled at empires. They established the Vagrant Yards in the Dead System. A hidden shipyard where engineers from a dozen species worked side by side. For the first time in galactic history, knowledge flowed freely between the cast-offs and the forgotten. Keth shipwrights learned human engineering. Human pilots trained on Marani navigation systems. Solari scientists shared discoveries that rewrote everything the coalition thought they knew about physics. And as they worked together, they uncovered a truth that the empires had buried for millennia. The Velthari, the Consortium, the hegemony, the three great powers that ruled the galaxy had been deliberately suppressing technology for thousands of years. Every species they conquered, they stripped of knowledge. Every discovery that threatened their dominance, they destroyed or locked away. The Cascade engine was not an accident. It was just one of countless technologies that the empires had hidden because they feared what would happen if anyone else possessed them. Dr. Tanaka presented the evidence to the Coalition Council. They keep us weak because strong allies might become rivals. They keep us ignorant because knowledge is the only true freedom. Every restriction, every limitation, every rule they have imposed on us was designed to make sure we could never threaten them. Vasquez looked around the council chamber at the faces of 12 species, united by a common enemy. Then we give them something to be threatened by. Far away in the shining capitals of the three empires, intelligence reports began to pile up. Unusual activity in dead systems. Ships that vanished from sensors. Encrypted communications that could not be broken for the first time in recorded history. The Velthari, the Consortium, and the Hegemony began discussing an alliance. Not against each other, but against the growing shadow that they could feel but could not quite see. The cast-offs were rising, and the empires were afraid. The combined Imperial fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 2,000 warships from 3 empires, gathered in one place for the first time since the ancient wars that had divided the galaxy between them. Velthari dreadnoughts flew alongside consortium cruisers and hegemony destroyers. Their weapons humming with enough power to burn worlds, they had tracked the coalition to the Threshold Nebula, a swirling cloud of gas and dust at the edge of known space. Intelligence reports suggested that the rebel fleet numbered no more than 300 vessels. Most of them converted freighters and salvaged hulks. It should have been a massacre. Admiral Vethkora commanded the Velthari contingent. He had been given a second chance after his humiliation at the hands of the vagrant, and he intended to make the most of it. This time, there would be no speeches, no negotiations, no mercy. All weapons ready, he ordered. The moment they appear on sensors, destroy everything. The Imperial fleet moved into the nebula like a predator closing in on wounded prey. Their sensors swept through the cosmic dust, searching for the ships they had come to annihilate. They found them. 300 Coalition vessels hung in space at the heart of the nebula. They were arranged in a perfect sphere, their hulls scarred by battles and hasty repairs. At the center of the formation, visible even at this distance, was the vagrant. Still rusted? Still impossible. Still refusing to die. They are not running, observed a consortium commander. They cannot run, Vethkora replied. They know it is over. Target their flagship. I want that ship erased from existence. 2,000 weapons locked onto the Coalition fleet. The moments seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, Vethkora gave the order. Fire! On the bridge of the Vagrant, Captain Vasquez watched the wall of energy racing toward her fleet. Behind her, the crew held their breath. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for, came down to this single moment. Samuel, she said calmly, show them what we have learned. In the engine room of the Vagrant, Samuel Okonkwo closed his eyes. But he was not alone. 300 pilots across 300 ships closed their eyes at the same moment. Each one sat at the heart of a Cascade engine. Each one trained by Samuel himself, each one connected to the others through a network that existed somewhere between thought and reality. They let go of certainty together. The Cascade bloom began. It was not like the demonstration against the Velthari fleet 2 years ago. That had been one ship becoming a ghost. This was 300 ships becoming something that had no name. Something that rewrote the rules of existence across an entire sector of space. The Coalition fleet flickered and vanished, exploding outward into a storm of probability that filled the nebula with impossible light. Every ship existed everywhere at once. Every pilot held the contradiction in their mind, supported by the others. Strengthened by their unity, the Imperial weapons fire passed through empty space. The targeting systems went mad, showing thousands of ships that might be real, that could be real, that were real and not real at the same time. And then the Cascade bloom did something no one had expected. It reached into the Imperial ships. Themselves, the empires had built their technology on secrets. Every ship, every station, every system ran on encrypted networks that hid information from those who were not meant to see it. The encryption was unbreakable by any normal means, but the Cascade bloom did not operate by normal means. It existed in probability space, where information flowed without barriers, where secrets could not hide from minds that accepted all. Possibilities is equally true. The encryption cracked. 17 minutes. That was how long the Cascade bloom lasted before the pilots reached their limits and the Coalition fleet snapped back into single existence. 17 minutes during which every secret the empires had ever kept poured into the galactic network. Broadcast on every frequency, recorded on every system, the ships of the Imperial fleet stopped firing. Their crews were too busy staring at screens that showed them the truth. The Velthari had stolen the technology that built their civilization from a species they then wiped from existence. The consortium had engineered plagues to keep subject worlds dependent on their medicine. The hegemony had erased entire cultures and replaced their histories with lies, centuries of atrocities, millennia of theft and murder and oppression, all of it documented in the Empire's own records, now exposed for the entire galaxy to see. Admiral Vethkora watched the truth spread across his bridge displays. He saw the records of what his ancestors had done, what his government continued to do, what he himself had helped conceal. For the first time in his long life, he felt something break inside him. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, "We are receiving transmissions from across the Dominion. There are ... protests, uprisings. Our client species are demanding answers." Similar reports came from the consortium and the hegemony. The revelation had not just exposed the empires to their enemies, it had exposed them to their own citizens, their own subjects, their own soldiers. The imperial fleet did not retreat. It simply fell apart. Ships broke formation as crews argued and officers resigned and mutiny spread from deck to deck. The largest military force in galactic history dissolved into chaos without the coalition firing a single shot. Captain Vasquez watched it happen from the bridge of the Vagrant. Beside her stood Kofi and Yuki and Samuel, and representatives from all 12 founding species of the coalition. They had done it. They had broken empires without becoming conquerors themselves.
"And what happens now?"
asked Tethmera of the Keth. Vasquez looked out at the drifting remnants of imperial power. "Now we help them rebuild, not as masters and servants. As partners, we share what we know. We lift each other up. We become what the empires were always afraid of. And if they resist, some will. Change is frightening, especially for those who have always held power. But the truth is out there now. It cannot be hidden again. They can fight against it, or they can grow. That choice is theirs." Months later, the Vagrant returned to Prometheus Station. The ship was still rusted, still held together by human stubbornness and alien ingenuity. Some had suggested giving it a new hull, making it worthy of its legend. Vasquez had refused. The rust was the point. The imperfection was the message. A young Keth navigator approached her on the observation deck. "Captain, what will humanity do now that the empires have fallen?" Vasquez smiled. It was the same smile she had given at the ceremony where the Velthari had meant to humiliate her species. It's the same thing we have always done. Find what has been thrown away, ask what it could become, and remind the universe that nothing is beneath possibility. Outside the windows, the stars burned bright, and on 1,000 worlds the cast-offs began to dream of futures that had once seemed impossible. The age of empires was over. The age of possibility had begun.